But in it, Christopher Nolan says how, like, it doesn't matter how many episodes you've seen. Like, you could have watched episodes 1 through 9, and you might think you know how the show will end. But he's like, trust me, like, you have no idea. You will be shocked. Hello, and thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about the TV show The Curse. It was created and written by Nathan Fielder and Benny Safdie, and it stars Fielder, Safdie, and Emma Stone. And The Curse has nothing to do with books or adaptations, although I will be referencing a couple books this show made me think of, but it has nothing to do with adaptations. And I went into the show not expecting to make a video on it, but after I watched this 10-hour show, I binged it in 2 days. Afterwards, I spent like 4 hours watching different interviews, and then I watched 2 different analysis videos, which I will link to down below. So I spent, 14 to 15 hours of my life with this show, and I was so obsessed with it after it ended. Like, I just have not been able to get it out of my mind. And so I decided to make a video sharing my thoughts. And those 2 analysis videos I watched, like I said, I'll link to them down below. And I will be reiterating some things they mentioned. YouTube keeps recommending other analysis videos to me, but I've only watched those 2 because I don't want to be too influenced by other people's opinions, and I still want to be sharing my own original ideas, And then also, this is going to be a longer video. It'll be broken up into the chapters down below, but also as far as the spoilers go, I will put some timestamps right here showing like the level of spoilers I get into as the video goes on. And The Curse is about newlyweds Asher and Whitney, who are in the town of Espanola, New Mexico, and they are wanting to improve this town in order to make it more eco-friendly and also improve the local economy because they own this strip mall, and so they're renting out different stores in there to just help the economy. And they make these passive homes, and a passive home is just like a self-sustaining home that is easy on the environment. And so that is their mission. And they want to turn this project on the town of Espanola into a TV show for HGTV. And so they hire Asher's childhood friend Dougie, who now works in reality TV. They hire him to be the director for their show. And so we see them working on the show while also seeing their personal lives. And this is a combination of like comedy, drama, horror, surrealism, and reality TV. Because even though like this isn't reality TV, obviously a lot of it is about reality TV, and it has like a very real feel to it, which in an interview, Nathan Fielder and Benny Safdie said how there was like no improvised conversations on the show. It all feels so natural, which is a testament to the writing as well as the acting. But yeah, none of this was improvised. Every conversation, it was all scripted. And it is a slow burn as we watch these characters grapple with who they are and who they want to be, and more importantly, who they want people to think they are. And the score is very eerie and uncomfortable, and there are so many uncomfortable moments, cringy moments, but also a lot of funny moments as well. And it has a lot of dark comedy. And there's also scenes that are just like terrifying and anxiety inducing. There is a scene involving a chiropractor where like it's not graphic or anything, but it is just so unsettling and disturbing, and it makes me almost never want to go to a chiropractor again because it was just such a disturbing scene. And then there's a scene in the final episode that is just truly horrific. Again, without being graphic, they're able to make it just so terrifying. And they did live screenings of each episode followed by an interview and a Q&A. And Christopher Nolan interviewed them. I think this was after the very first episode. He interviewed Nathan Fielder and Benny Safdie, which how cool is that to have Christopher Nolan interviewing you about this show? That was a great interview. I would definitely recommend checking it out. But in it, Christopher Nolan says how like it doesn't matter how many episodes you've seen. Like you could have watched episodes 1 through 9 and you might think you know how the show will end, but he's like, trust me, like you have no idea how the show is going to end. Like you will be shocked. And I definitely would agree with that. But I did watch a lot of these Q&A videos, and Benny Safdie seems to be the regular, like he's always there. But then some of them have Nathan Fielder, some of them have Emma Stone, as well as the woman who plays Kara and other people. So I watched a number of those interviews and I found them really interesting. For this next section, I will be getting into light spoilers. Like it's nothing that you don't know by watching the first couple episodes, but there will be light spoilers for this part of it. And I'm just going to talk about the general setup of the show. I have watched Nathan Fielder's other work. I have not seen the rehearsal, yeah, I really need to watch that. But a lot of his shows, including The Curse, are just like a commentary on reality TV and how staged and fake it is and how disingenuous it is. And we see these characters like modify the ethics that they have as the show progresses in order to make for a better reality show. You know, Whitney, for example, in the very first episode, she is very upset when Dougie stages a woman's tears. She's like, that's not who we are. Like, we don't do that. Like, that was so rude. And yet, as the show progresses, we see her willing to stage these heartfelt moments for the camera, even though in the moment they're not heartfelt at all, but she wants to get the shot. And so suddenly she's fine telling people what to do and directing them. Also, you know, with the way her character is, I think she also kind of likes being able to control the people around her for the sake of the show. We also have the two people who are coming to look at the house, and she's able to tell them like what they can and can't say about her passive home. And then, yeah, the conversation with Kara. And so, yeah, just Whitney, you know, she's very narcissistic and self-absorbed, of course. And so even though initially she has these like morals and ethics about things, she's willing to compromise those morals in order to make herself look better. And she's also very sensitive about her passive homes because that's a reflection of her, you know, which, by the way, the passive homes are mirrored. And so they cause like a distorted view of the world around them, which obviously is very symbolic. But yeah, she's very sensitive about those. And so again, telling the couple what they can and can't say about it, because these passive homes are a reflection of herself in a way. And then we have Asher, who is her limp noodle of a husband. And he believes Whitney's on-screen persona of her being like this selfless person who wants to improve the lives of others around her, and she has no regard for her own, you know, financial security or anything. And we see Asher, he does worry about finances. And I think this is important because Whitney comes from a rich family. And so, of course, as a rich person, she's like, money doesn't matter. Like, stop being so obsessed with money. But that's because she has rich parents that she can go to anytime she needs thousands of dollars. Whereas Asher doesn't have that background. And so for him, money is a big deal. And the reason she's even able to have these passive homes and own this strip mall is because the land was given to her by her rich parents. And her rich parents are called slumlords because they also own rental properties and apartment buildings, but they are very disliked by the community because they are seen as like more ruthless, I guess. And so she hates what they represent and does not want to be associated with them. And yet she's fine taking their money, even though to her it's dirty money, right? And yet she's fine accepting it. But back to Asher. So he truly believes Whitney is a good person, and he stands up for her often in over-the-top ways that just makes things worse. And again, these are some of those uncomfortable scenes when we see him blowing up at people for the way they're talking to or about Whitney. And he also tries desperately to be funny, and yet his jokes are always just awkward and fall flat. And with Whitney, it does seem like in the first few episodes, it seems like she does genuinely find him funny. Like there's scenes where they're messing around, and to the audience, like I felt awkward at the way he was messing around, but she seems to genuinely find him funny. And it's not until later on they're watching a focus group and their reaction to the pilot episode, and a lot of them found Asher very uncomfortable and dislikable, and they're like, why is she with him? And this really gets in Whitney's head. And as the show goes on, she starts to see him as dragging her down. And then we have Dougie, who is the director, and he is someone who is filled with guilt because he caused the death of his wife in a drunk driving accident. And yet he refuses to accept the blame. Like, as he talks about it, he always blames it on like, oh, it was a horrible coincidence. It was bad luck, or even saying that he was cursed. And that's the only way things make sense, is that I've been cursed. And he's a bully and a manipulator, as we see when he's filming shows. He's fine manipulating situations and exploiting people in order to get a good shot. And he's also a huge bully, but at the same time, like, he doesn't necessarily try to hide who he is. So he's unlikable, but he's not quite as fake as Whitney is, for example. However, he does care about appearances to some extent because he is an alcoholic and he has this intense breathalyzer. So clearly he went to the trouble of buying a very expensive breathalyzer, and Benny Safdie did say that, you know, they put a lot of thought into the kind of breathalyzer this character would have. And he only uses it when he is in the car with someone else, and then he sees that they're uncomfortable with him driving, considering he's had a few drinks, and so he'll take the breathalyzer out to show them, like, look, I'm making sure I'm within the limit. And it makes me wonder, like, does he ever use that when he's alone? Probably not, because he only cares when there is someone else in the car with him. And then, yeah, he is so mean to Asher, and we hear talks about, like, when they were younger, how he would bully Asher, and yet Asher was like, oh, like, we were just messing around, we were just friends, like, you didn't mean anything by it. Even though Dougie was like, I mean, we were bullying you. But Asher just doesn't even register it, and he's so bad at reading social situations, which is one of the reasons why he himself is just so awkward. And he stays friends with Dougie. We see him cross a line in a huge way during a certain part in this show, and yet Asher is able to still like be friends with him and hangs out with him. And you're just like, why are you with this guy? Why are you friends with him? And then also the way Dougie looks too is just him like doing the most, being so over the top, like with his jewelry and his watch and even his hairstyle and just his whole look. Even though I said he doesn't try to hide who he is, at the same time, he does care about appearances, right? And he is trying to show himself as being the certain kind of person who dresses the way he does. Like it's just so over the top the way he dresses and accessorizes. And then the title of this show comes from the first episode where Dougie wants to get footage of Asher giving money to a girl in a parking lot who is selling sodas, and Asher only has $100 bill on him. And like I said, he's very concerned about money, and $100 is a lot. And so he gives the girl the 100 for the scene, but after he thinks they're no longer filming, he goes back to her and he's like, hey, I need that money back, but I'll go break it and get changed, and I'll come back and I'll pay you the real amount for the soda. Or he's gonna pay her more than the cost of the soda, like $20, but obviously 20 is much less than 100, and the little girl is upset. Her name is Nala, and she's like, no, like you gave this to me, but he forcibly takes it back from her, and then she says, I curse you. And Asher. Nathan Fielder is the actor, but he's kind of like, okay. And then he goes and he does try to return and give her $20. However, at this point she is gone. But then later they coincidentally end up running into each other, and he ends up becoming the landlord for Nala and her family. And later in the show, he realizes that there may have been some substance to Nala's curse. And once he realizes this, like he just becomes obsessed with the idea that he has been cursed. And then now I'm going to get into details on the characters specifically and what happens in episodes 1 through 9. So I still will not be talking about spoilers for the finale quite yet, but I'm going to begin with Whitney. So like I said, Whitney starts to get more and more easily annoyed with Asher and just is so, like, she has no respect for him, no admiration for him, and she just makes fun of him and bullies him with Dougie. And after she watches the pilot for the first episode, like the first cut of the pilot, she's like the editing is good, but it's just so lifeless. Like, what is wrong with this? Like, it has no heart. It's just so empty. And rather than acknowledging like, yeah, it's because you guys are fake and disingenuous and this is all staged, instead, Dougie, he's like, it's because there's no tension, there's no conflict. And he points out a moment where like Whitney had rolled her eyes at Asher. And he's like, we need to focus on that, like the tension between you and Asher, and just really get into how you feel about him and your relationship. And they have only been married for like a year, by the way. And it's funny too when they're watching the show, because the audience, we also watch the show. And there's a part where one of the guys goes on for so long about the paint they're using, like because they're covering up graffiti for the town, and the paint is like recycled or whatever, but he is literally talking about the paint drying and how quick it dried. And there's a phrase like, when something is boring, you say it's like watching paint dry. And so this seemed like very literal, right? Like the show was so empty and boring, and we literally have a scene where they're talking about paint drying. But anyway, so after this, she starts to film talking head clips where she is complaining about Asher, feeling like he doesn't understand who she is, he doesn't see the real her, and how there is so much more to her, and he is just dragging her down. And she also says how like he worships her, and you would think that would be a great relationship, but really it's not. And she just finds him very pathetic. And amid all of this, she's also very frustrated whenever anybody connects her to her parents, because like I said, her parents are not considered good people. And so she's like, I'm a good person. I'm trying to improve the town of Espanola. So do not associate me with these quote unquote slumlords who only care about money, because I'm so much better than that. And multiple times she gets in disagreements with them. One time they come to see her show and she like rushes them off the set being like, get out of here. What are you doing here? And then another time she goes to their apartment and she gets in an argument with them. But she literally tells them like, I am a grown-up woman. Like, you need to treat me as such. You need to respect me. You need to see that I have my own things going on. And like, I am an adult. And Whitney also wants so badly to be friends with this native artist named Kara. And Kara, she puts up with Whitney because she is talking to someone else. Whitney is there and she is talking to them about a different buyer. And the guy is like, why do you have to see them? And Kara says, sometimes you have to put in FaceTime with people you don't like because they might buy your your art. And clearly she's also referencing Whitney, who is standing right there when she says this, because Whitney has bought multiple pieces by Kara. And yeah, she just desperately wants to be liked by Kara. And she goes in over the top, cringy ways, trying so hard to show how even though she's a white person, like how she gets it, you know, and she is doing her best to help Kara and to help fight racism and whatever. And she even pays Kara $20,000 to be a consultant on the show. And really, she gets the $20,000 from her dad, but she tells Kara like, oh, it's from the studio. They just had to pay you in cash. So she literally pays Kara just to have an excuse to spend time with her, because Kara clearly doesn't really like Whitney, and Whitney can sense that, but she wants so desperately to be seen as her friend. And there are times where maybe it seems like Kara is softening towards Whitney, but ultimately, like, I mean, the final scene with them is when Whitney goes to get a massage and Kara is the masseuse, and it's this awkward scene. But prior to that, they were filming footage for the TV show, and Kara and Whitney were having a conversation, and Kara like isn't saying much and she's not saying the right things, and she literally tells her what to say. And so then Kara says this, and then we see it later used in the show as if it's this true heartwarming moment between these two artists. And this reminds me of American Fiction / Erasure, which I recently covered, and how people will take the stories of others and erase their actual story and create their own version of the story. And then that's what is put out into the world. And as said in that movie, white people think they want to know the truth, but really they just want to be absolved. And Whitney has a lot of this white guilt. And she doesn't actually want to be friends with Kara. She doesn't want to know the real Kara. She wants to be friends with Kara as a way to feel absolved for the guilt she feels, right? And so she is literally telling Kara what to say because she doesn't actually care what Kara truly feels, you know, and so she is taking who Kara is and she's making her into what she wants Kara to be. And it's interesting too, because it does seem like Whitney wants to belong to something, but there's a part where she sees this group of religious people like praying and she is standing on the outside and she's invited in, but she's like, no, like I'll just watch. But it seems like she wants to go in, but also she wasn't raised as any religion, but then Asher, he is Jewish. And so she like enthusiastically takes on the Jewish religion and she converts. And then there's a part in one of the episodes where Asher is talking because she's insulting Kara. And so Asher, he is like, you know, you can't say that because you don't understand Kara and her experience and the way people process their cultural trauma. And he relates it to Jewish people in the Holocaust and finding ways to process that. And so Whitney is like, you know what, you're right. I don't know what that's like. You know, I'm not Jewish, so I'm not in your shoes. I don't know. And then he tells her like, just because you're a convert doesn't make you any less Jewish. And he also tells her that there are the same amount of Jewish people in America as there are Native people. So saying how like, you know, it's still a minority, it's still an exclusive group. And yeah, I think that's what Whitney wants, is to be part of some like exclusive group and to be accepted. But Kara didn't accept her, right? Like into her exclusive group. And also Whitney could never actually be Native American. And so it's impossible for her to, you know, join that group, but she's able to convert to Judaism. And so I think when Asher tells her that, like, just because you're a convert, it doesn't make you any less Jewish. In some ways, I think that is what Whitney wants. But I think when it comes from Asher, she just doesn't respect anything Asher says, though, at the end of the day. But yeah, I think like she romanticizes being in a minority. She doesn't see the reality of what it's like. Yeah, she just wants so badly to show people that she understands. Like, she might not be the same as them, but she respects them and she understands and she is putting in the work and she is so sensitive to, you know, the native people of Española and their cultures and the laws in regards to the land. And she wants to show how much she respects that. And Whitney is also a good example of the type of people who act like they care about helping others and care about helping people of color, and yet they make the situation all about themselves and use it as a way to show how good they are. And they're not actually interested in the issues and helping the actual people. Like I said, they're just interested in using this as a way to highlight what a great person they are. And there's times where she's having certain conversations and it's not even cringy in my mind because she is kind of saying the right things. And it seems like she believes it to an extent. But I do think as the show progresses, she gets more and more self-absorbed. And she is just doing it to keep up appearances. And she wants to be perceived in a positive way by others. And it doesn't matter if it's the real her or not. She just wants them to like her. And there is a part where a crew member says something to her. She's like, do you remember what you told me on my first day? And Whitney doesn't remember. But the crew member was very touched by what Whitney had said to her. And she even gets emotional, being like, that meant a lot to me. But Whitney has no recollection of even saying this. So it's an example of how she does say the right things. And maybe she does fool a lot of people. And they're like, wow, like, I really like her. But ultimately, she doesn't even remember what she's saying, right? Because it doesn't mean anything to her at the end of the day. And so even though I said at the start, it seems like maybe she does really believe these things, I think ultimately she believes these things just to keep up appearances and also to prove how unlike her parents she is, right? When really, like, her parents are better people than her because at least they're honest with who they are. And we also have the scene where there is a guy interested in buying the passive home, and she has been so upset with people who buy a passive home, but then they lose the passive certification by wanting to install AC or getting rid of the induction stove or doing this or that. And so she is so annoyed, being like, we need to be more careful of who we sell these to because these are important and we need someone who sees how important they are. And there is a guy who is interested in the passive home, but he has a Blue Lives Matter sticker on his truck. And so Whitney is just like, no, like, I don't want him buying it. But Asher reaches out to him anyway. And as they are giving this guy a tour of the house, he clearly is an ideal buyer because he actually likes that this is self-sufficient and he likes that it's passive. He says how he even looked for other passive homes in the area and nothing lived up to the standards of Whitney's homes. And so he respects it and he wants it. And as we hear from him, we see that he's more than just his Blue Lives sticker essentially, but Whitney is still just so upset and she stonewalls Asher the rest of the night because she is so upset that Asher even reached out to this guy. And then, like I said, Whitney likes to act like she doesn't care about money. She tells the woman at the jean store to charge her own credit card in order to allow people to steal. And yet by the end of the show, when he is giving the house to that family, she's like, that's great, but like, can we afford that? And he's like, I mean, who cares if we can? Whether we're broke or not, it doesn't matter. Like, we're helping people and we have each other, and that's what really counts. But we see that Whitney, she's like, I actually do care about money. And when Asher cared about money, he could be the one worrying about it and she could act like she was so much better. But now if Asher like truly doesn't care about money, then now it's going to be on Whitney to either show that she truly does care and like show this side of her she doesn't want to be shown, or she's just going to have to put her money where her mouth is and actually really start to not care. And then also in that, TV montage where she's complaining about Asher and she's saying how there's so much more to her and she's a person full of contradictions and Asher just doesn't see the real her. Whitney, the real her, is not a good person. And so I think she truly does wish Asher would see the real her, because even people who are bad and who want to be seen in a certain way, I think they do want someone, and specifically Asher, since that's her husband, I think she does truly want him to see the real her and that she's not as good as she seems and that she is just an incredible narcissist, right? And Emma Stone called Whitney a human mood ring, where she just goes in her room and she she reads the room and then she tries to be what people in that room want her to be. And she just kind of mirrors the mood of other people. And that's a way she tries to like blend in and be liked. And like I said, at times, like she is very charming and she is very likable, but then other times it's just uncomfortable and cringy. And again, like with her motivations, ultimately she is just very out of touch because she comes from a rich family and she just can't relate and she doesn't understand as hard as she tries to. But then, as I said, as the show goes on, whatever out of touch motivations she may have had, as the show goes on, she just becomes more and more self-absorbed. And then to talk about Asher, so like I said, he's very socially awkward, very off-putting. However, I wouldn't say he's someone who is malicious, like on his own. Like he's a coward and that causes him to do bad things. And because he's easily manipulated and gullible, that also causes him to be in situations where he hurts other people. For example, he had worked at a casino and he turns the casino in. He gives a story to the news. He's a whistleblower exposing things the casino did. And the only reason he does that is because Whitney encourages him to do it. And she claims later on, like, oh, you wouldn't do anything good if it wasn't for me, referencing him turning in the casino. But the reason she even wanted him to turn in the casino wasn't because, like, it's the right thing to do. She wanted to do it because they did an interview with a news channel that went terribly. And so in order to get them not to play that interview, they need another story to bargain with. And so that is why she's like, turn in the casino, use that story instead. And it's interesting with the casino because he had worked there prior to marrying Whitney and, working with the passive homes in this TV show. And it seems like he actually liked working at the casino. And we see one of his coworkers who also seemed seemed to genuinely like Asher, which is hard to find because Asher is not an easy person to be around. But we also see that he had different ideas to improve the casino. And when he goes to visit, they have implemented those ideas and they are working. And so I think when he's there, like, I think he misses working at this casino. And yet Whitney convinced him to quit this job that he liked in order to work with her. And, throughout the show, he's trying to be the person he thinks Whitney wants him to be and kind of trying to mirror Whitney, who is a good person who doesn't care about money and is so understanding. And so he feels like he needs to be like that as well. And there's a part where this casino friend of his, like I said, who seemed like a genuine friend, he goes up to him and they're talking about the casino being exposed. And the guy doesn't think Asher did it. But then Asher, he could just kind of let it go. But instead, he is really rude and awkward. He's being like, it was me. I turned them in. And Whitney's there, so he has his arm around Whitney being like, yeah, I'm the whistleblower. And I did it because it's the right thing. And what the casino was doing is wrong. And the guy calls him a tool. And he's like, tools fix things. So you're right. I am a tool. And so just how he was being so rude, trying to stand up for the right thing because it's what he thinks Whitney wants him to be. And throughout the show, he does act very childlike. Like he even is pretending to be a baby at various times. And he's very submissive to Whitney. And then he also has a miniature penis, which could symbolize the fact that he never really grew up and became his own man. And we see in the first episode that Whitney's dad has this as well. And he tells Asher, like, don't let this hold you back. Like, you need to just tell people about it. Like, walk up to someone and just tell them you're small and make a joke of it. Like, allow yourself to be humiliated and allow yourself to be the joke. And trust me, like, you can still live a good, fulfilling life. Like, look at me. And then because he's pushed to do it by Whitney, he goes to this like business comedy class. And we hear that he talks to the instructor privately, telling him like he wants to find a way to make a joke of his size, but he talks about it privately. But then during the class, the instructor brings it up in front of everybody, even though Asher tells him like, I don't want to talk about this right now in front of everybody. And I don't want to workshop a joke on this with all of these other people. And when other people voice being uncomfortable with this, the instructor then blames it on Asher. When the instructor, he was the one that was bringing it up when Asher was asking him not to. So the instructor was just such a jerk. And then he kicks Asher out of the class. And then, like I said, Asher's jokes, they always fall flat and they're always so awkward. And so he tries to follow the dad's advice, but it just doesn't work out. And in the 9th episode, so Whitney and Dougie have been, filming these scenes where she is expressing her dislike for Asher and how she doesn't know if their relationship will last and how he doesn't see the real her and there's so much more to her. And the network tells them that they don't want any of that in the show. So none of it, like it's already been cut and it's not even necessary for Asher to see it because it won't even be seen by anybody. And yet Whitney tells him like, no, like show him the footage, show it to him. He wants to see it. And so he watches this footage and afterwards, he then has this breakdown where he's like, you know what, you're right. Everything you said, it's true. And I'm a bad person. I'm a liar, but I want to be better. Like, I know I can be like with you by my side. Like, I believe in you and I'm all in on Whitney and I want to be the man that you think I can be, kind of a thing. And he also tells her like, and if you ever wanted me to be gone, like I would feel it if you meant it. You wouldn't even have to say anything. I would feel that you didn't want me around and I would leave without you even having to say a word. And Whitney, initially, it seems like as he is saying this, at first, I mean, she's surprised for one, because she's like, what? Like, you're not angry? You still want to be with me? But then like, it seems like she is, touched in a way and she likes hearing this because she is a narcissist. So to hear someone say like, like I'm all in on you, I believe in you and I will be what you want me to be. I think part of her does like that and it feeds her ego. But her expression was interesting. I'd love to hear people's thoughts in the comments because it seems like as this scene comes to an end, it seems like she's already starting to second guess agreeing to stay with him. And I feel like she's already being like, what did I just do? Why did I agree to this? Because even if she likes the idea of being worshipped, like she says in the monologue, ultimately though, like she wants someone who's her equal, who she can respect, who actually sees her. And in this monologue, we see that Asher still doesn't see the real her. He sees who she wants the world to think she is, but he doesn't see the real her. And again, he is just so weak. And so he can never satisfy her, in so many different ways, right? And so ultimately, I think she still is just dislikes him. And now to finally get into the finale, which again is so bizarre, but so amazing. And I read that Benny Safdie and Nathan Fielder, right from the start, they knew this is how the show was going to end. And so everything throughout the first 9 episodes, they found ways to make it work for this ending. And so I thought that was really interesting, like the creative process, how, Nathan Fielder had an experience where a woman cursed him when he didn't give her money. So there's that inspiration as well. But then the fact that they knew like this is how it will end. And so we need everything to lead up to this finale. But anyway, the finale starts, we do a time jump, and Whitney is now like very pregnant. Their new show is out. It's called The Green Queen, and they are on Rachel Ray promoting the show, and they were on a video call. And we see Rachel Ray like comment how their idea of passive living is so unrealistic for most people. And she's like, what's advice you have that people can actually apply? Because a lot of what you're saying, most people either can't or aren't able to do this. And then it's funny because Rachel Ray uses this segment to then segue into a sponsorship for these like eco-friendly wipes. And then from there, she just goes on to her other guest, and Whitney&Asher are stuck awkwardly in the background. Like Rachel Ray just clearly doesn't even care about them or their show. And after it's over, Whitney is like, she didn't even comment on the baby. Like maybe she didn't notice I was pregnant. And then later on, they're referencing season 2, and Asher is like, oh, season 2 will be good, and we'll also have the baby. Like that'll make it interesting. And so just seeing how the baby, how the pregnancy, the family aspect is so marketable. And they also say how people have a hard time finding the show because it's not on HGTV, it's on HGTV Go. And so this was a funny line in regards to all of the different streaming services there are. And The Curse specifically too, right? Like it's not on Netflix or something, so people might have a hard time being like, wait, how do I even watch The Curse? But because Whitney is about to give birth, you know, the passive home, it can get up to like 78 degrees. I mean, it gets even hotter than that. But she says in the summer, you know, once the home like acclimates or whatever, after 5 hours, it reaches 78 degrees. But for the sake of their baby, they are installing an AC in the baby room. And as they are installing this, you know, this makes the home not passive, something Whitney was so adamant about throughout the whole show. And so she tells the contractor, she's like, can we get like a panel to cover the AC controls? That way, you know, I use this home for people to tuber, and I don't want them to know that I have made it not passive. So we need to hide this from the world, which is obviously great symbolism for, you know, our social media day and age where people are hiding the things that don't fit with their online persona. And it's just a great representation of Whitney as a person, right? Like she has who she wants the world to see, and then she has the real side of her, which is hidden behind a panel, right? And then that night they are in bed, and Asher is singing to the baby in Whitney's belly, and he's flashing this light of the world on her belly, and he says to her, like, there's a little me inside of you. And Whitney just has this look of just like, oh, like, do not say that. Like disgusted by him, not wanting him there, and just being like, oh my gosh, like this is the man I'm with. And then they wake up the next day to find Asher on the ceiling. He is sleeping on the ceiling, and she's like what? And at first they think it is because of the pressurization of the house, and it has something to do with the baby room. So he's like, open up all the doors, you know, remove the pressure from the baby room, open windows. And so she does all of this, but he is still on the ceiling. And when he tries to get down, he describes it as falling up, and he tries to get down and he just smacks right into the ceiling. And Whitney even tries throwing a towel up to him and pulling him down, but it doesn't work. And then she tries grabbing him, and like they are in both midair as she is trying to get him down. And it was just such a cool scene. Speaking of Christopher Nolan, the stuff with Asher on the roof kind of reminded me of Inception, right? When Joseph Gordon-Levitt has that scene where the hotel is spinning and he's fighting the guy. And this was done practically in The Curse as well. And so yeah, it was just so cool the way they filmed this. But while Asher is on the roof, while they're trying to get him off, suddenly Whitney goes into labor. And so she runs outside because they think something is wrong with the house, and they don't want her to get sucked up into whatever air pocket Asher is part of. And so like Asher tries reaching the phone so they can call 911, but he can't reach it. So Whitney grabs it. She goes outside. She calls her doula, who is like the guy who helps her give birth. And then she also calls the firefighters. And her doula shows up because she needs a ride to the hospital, because Asher, he leaves the house through the roof, but then he is like on the outside landing, and he is outside of the house, but he is still stuck to the ceiling. So she's like, I need someone to take me to the hospital because I'm giving birth right now. And so the doula shows up to drive her, and he tries to get Asher off of the roof. But as soon as he removes Asher, like Asher, his body just wants to skyrocket into space. And so the grip is slipping, and the doula ends up letting go, but Asher is flung into a tree. So he's still safe. He is just having to hold on to a branch. And so while he is holding onto the branch, they call Dougie to come see Asher while they wait for the firefighters. Meanwhile, Whitney is driven to the hospital. And it's funny because the doula, he mentions taking her to the Espanola hospital, but she's like, no, like my birth plan is to go to Santa Fe, which is funny because this whole time she's been like, oh, Espanola, like it's my home. It's such a special place. It's so much better than Santa Fe. And yet she wants her baby not born in Espanola. And so Whitney is at the hospital. Meanwhile, Dougie shows up. And of course, as Asher is telling people, like, my body wants to skyrocket into space. Like, you need to help get me down from here. in a safe way. Like, it's not that I'm scared, it's that I can't control this. But Dougie assumes that Asher is just scared of being a dad. And so he is like running away by going up into a tree. And Dougie also exploits the situation and he just thinks it's funny and he records it and he sets up mics to record Asher. And then the firefighters show up. And again, Asher has a very thought out plan on how to get him down. He's like, put a net across me, attach the net to the fire truck, and then you can take me down and the net will prevent me from shooting up. But the firefighters are like, man, this guy's crazy. And so instead they send up someone with a chainsaw to chainsaw the branch off that he is holding on to. And when he sees they have a chainsaw, he is terrified, screaming to Dougie, begging them to stop, begging Dougie to get them to stop. But they just keep sawing the branch. And then when the branch is cut off, the branch falls to the ground. Meanwhile, Asher shoots up into space. And everyone, of course, is shocked. And so while this is happening with Asher, meanwhile, Whitney is at the hospital and she is freaking out and very stressed out. And she is like, where is Asher? Where is he at? And then she needs an emergency C-section because her baby is upside down. And so as she goes into surgery, she wants her doctor and her doula to come with her, but neither of them can. And so she's so freaked out because she's alone and she wants people with her. But then when they remove the baby, they pull the curtain down and they show her the baby. And then like right away, everything she had been stressed about, like you see it just melt away and suddenly none of it matters. And she is just filled with like joy and peace and calm as she sees this baby. And then they ask her like, oh, do you want us to bring your doula and your doctor in? And she's like, no. Then they're like, oh, do you want us to see if Asher is here? And she's like, sure. Like she's just suddenly like everything that was stressing her out and the fact that she felt so alone and wanted people with her, suddenly none of that matters. And she is just sees her baby and she's like, wow, like the baby like fills every void she had in that second, you know? And like I said with her parents, she was constantly telling them like, I'm a grown-up woman now, like you need to treat me like an adult. And so I think some ways like having a baby is the ultimate grown-up thing, right? Like now another life is relying on you. And so I feel like in some ways that baby, like she feels like the adult she's been wanting to be all along. And now people will have to see her as more of an adult since now she has reached like the epitome of adulthood. And also society will also see motherhood as being like the epitome of womanhood, right? Which I don't necessarily believe, but that's what people think. And so now she has achieved this, right? And I'm sure she will be a very pretentious mom who will condescendingly say how, you know, how much work it is to be a mom and all the sacrifice, and but how it's still so rewarding. And Emma Stone, her acting throughout this show has been fantastic, but like her expressions in these final scenes as she like sees her baby, like it was fantastic, like superb performance on her part. And then to talk about Dougie, so we see Dougie just in shock, just sitting down, just in shock when a cameraman, because he'd had a drone recording Asher, and a cameraman comes up and he's like, oh, like we found the drone, it's like 700 feet in the air. And Dougie just bursts into tears and he just starts sobbing. And he's like sobbing, so it's hard to hear, but he's saying something like, oh, like I'm just so sorry. Like he's just apologizing just to anybody he's ever done anything wrong to. And like I said, he had guilt about the death of his wife, but he wouldn't allow himself to admit it was his fault. And so now the fact that he has caused the death of his wife. And then now he probably feels guilt that he caused the death of Asher because he did not believe him when Asher told him that he was going to skyrocket into space. And so he is just having this emotional mental breakdown and he is just sobbing and apologizing to the world. And then to talk about Asher. So his fate, it is just truly terrifying. Like we see him shooting through the atmosphere. And at one point we hear him saying something like, if I come down, like if you let me come down, and he kind of trails off. But clearly he is bargaining with some kind of higher power, being like, if you let me come down and live, like I will change. But we then see him just progressively going higher and higher before he dies. And we see his like frozen dead body floating in Earth's atmosphere. So that is just like so chilling. Like it's chilling just to think about it. But also when he is in the tree and he sees the chainsaw and he is yelling, screaming, like begging them to stop and begging Dougie to get them to stop. And like the terror, like, oh, like it was horrifying and so stressful, but I feel like stressful doesn't totally capture just the anxiety and the horror of what happens to Asher. And I've heard different ideas of what this whole thing symbolizes, but at the end of episode 9, he tells Whitney, if I sense you don't want me around, you won't even have to say it, like I'll just be gone. And she had that expression the night before where clearly she didn't want him around. And so he caused himself to shoot up into space by saying that, and then Whitney feeling it, and so she caused him to go away. And I do do think Whitney, though, like, I don't think if it was her expression and her desires that caused this to happen to him, I don't think she was aware of it. And I think she truly was terrified. And I think she truly was trying to help him. Like, she was sincere in wanting to get him down. And also, I think she sincerely thought it was something relating to the house, because when she goes to get her phone, she's like crawling so that she doesn't get sucked up. And then she thinks she feels the pressure of the air pocket. And then she like freaks out and scrambles out of the room as quick as she can because she's in fear that she's gonna, be on the ceiling too. And I think that was genuine. And it's all of this with Whitney scrambling around the house, like, you are scared, but it was also kind of funny too, like the way she frantically is like, I feel the pressure, and then she's running out of the room on all fours with her pregnant belly. But people also said that in the end, Whitney smiles and looks directly into the camera, and they're like, oh, it's because she knows Asher is gone, and it's because she did it and she's glad. But I don't think she was thinking of Asher at all in that moment, which, she should be, but I think she's just so consumed with her baby now that she just doesn't even care about Asher, and she just feels suddenly so fulfilled and like, wow, like she's been trying to find her purpose and trying to find a meaning in life and trying to be seen as a responsible grown-up. And so I think this baby suddenly, it gives her everything she needs in that moment, which it's funny because earlier in the season, someone was making a joke between the similarities between smothering and mothering. And so I wonder if Whitney will be a smothering mother to her child. But back to Asher, people also say that Asher is his child reborn. And there's a part when he is on the ceiling and he's trying to get down and he smashes into the skylight. And right when that happens, Whitney feels a contraction. And then, like I said, throughout the show, he's comparing himself to a baby. Even when he's in the tree, she's going to the hospital and he's like, just focus on the baby, not this baby in the tree, but the baby in your belly. And then her baby is upside down, which is why she needs a C-section. And Asher, his world is turned upside down. And then he even tells her, right, like, there's a tiny me inside of you. And then the baby is like forcibly removed from Whitney's belly through a C-section. And Asher is forcibly removed from Earth by being sucked up against his will. And in one of the videos I watched, he talks about how Nathan Fielder seems to like playing these self-loathing roles. Like, even in his parody shows, he like plays a version of himself that is very self-loathing. And here he plays Asher, a man who is so unfit for this earth that he is literally just removed off of the earth. And he is constantly emasculated by everyone around him and constantly humiliated, even if he doesn't even realize it, like I said, because sometimes he just doesn't read the situation. And he is trying to be the type of man Whitney wants him to be. Like, it doesn't matter like what he wants. He's not even thinking about that as the show goes on. Like, near the end, he's like, what does Whitney want me to be? What would Whitney want? And so he becomes a man of no substance because he has no backbone. And if you're a person of no substance, there's nothing holding you to the ground, right? And so he ends up being flung into space. And then also he has this weird fetish where he likes the thought of the woman he's with having sex with another man. And we hear about this in relation to a past girlfriend, but also with Whitney. And so we see this come true too, right? Because now not only will Whitney end up marrying another man, this other man will also be raising his son, Asher's son. And then there's also a part in the show when Asher cuts himself, like a nail stabs the palm of his hand. And this, of course, seems like a very obvious reference to Christ, right? Who was stabbed in his hand. And Jesus Christ is the symbolism for, self-sacrifice and resurrection. And so you could see like Asher, he sacrifices himself, but then he is reborn as his child and resurrected, you could say. And then in the video by Marshall Stannis, he talks about how the ending, this finale, is very Kafkaesque. And I have read The Metamorphosis and I would highly recommend it. But that story is about Gregor, who wakes up one day to find he has been turned into a beetle. And his main concern when he realizes this is the fact that he can no longer work. And he has been supporting his parents and his sister. Their main concern and his boss's main concern is, the fact that he can't work anymore, rather than being concerned that he's turned into a beetle. And the story is interesting because you see Gregor, he has had a metamorphosis, but over the course of the story, the sister, his condition allows her to shine and step up in her own way. So she ends up having her own kind of metamorphosis. And so I don't know if this is similar to Asher being Gregor and Whitney being the sister who is able to have a metamorphosis in a positive way, whereas Asher, his surreal experience is in a negative way. But also both situations, like Franz Kafka, his stories deal with capitalism, right? Like Metamorphosis is a commentary on capitalism. And so you could see that too with what happens to Asher, because initially they think the house is to blame. And Asher, he's like, there is no way we're raising our child in this house. We are moving out right away. And obviously this would have huge implications for their career, right? Because they have based their lives on these passive homes. And now it's like, wow, like we can't even live in these homes anymore. Like Like, look what's happening to us. And so I did think the Kafka metamorphosis was an interesting comparison. And yeah, like the surrealism of this finale is definitely, like the absurdity of it is very Kafkaesque. But then also in that Marshall Stannis video, he quoted someone on Reddit who compared Asher's situation to being symbolic of what he and Whitney are doing to the neighborhood and the gentrification they are doing. And I am just going to quote this Reddit user because they worded it so well. His situation that he was floating upwards was misunderstood. Just as Whitney and Asher thought they were helping the neighborhood, so did the firefighters. They assumed falsely Asher's situation. They helped another person's situation with their nuanced background, Asher waking up stuck on the ceiling and being unable to get down, and just assumed they could just apply what worked for their own to another's culture. The seemingly well-meaning doula even made a point to say, "Do you trust me?" and falsely assumed that positive intentions can somehow solve a complex, unsolvable issue. Asher's anti-gravity, but also how Whitney&Asher thought that simply adding in a coffee store and some jeans would magically enhance the community. Even for practical things that seemed smaller scale, like shoplifting not being worthy of jailing, was actually a complex issue with grander consequences that Whitney glanced over. Many assumed that they could help another person's situation, culture if you will. While this can be hard to understand, to witness Asher normally then waking up on the ceiling, we get a microcosm of Kara's existence as a native in modern America. It can be hard to empathize with what it must be like to be Kara, but we can literally see what it is like for Asher as he is physically being pulled away from everything that can possibly ground him, and how obtuse and meaningless all outside gestures to help him are. These gestures end up killing him. They literally chop away the very last piece of land Asher was holding onto to stay alive. I see a lot of parallels with gentrification, land rights, and marginalization. Marginalization ends up pushing vulnerable people to the edge of society. In Asher's case, the edge of Earth. And someone responded to this Reddit user commenting saying they misunderstood the gravity of the situation, which is a hilarious comment. But also the fact that he has this plan for them to put a net on him, and the firefighters like appease him by like placing a bundled up net on his back. Like, it's so condescending. But again, the way people will hear someone's complaint and their needs, and these people are expressing what they need. And so the outsiders, you know, the people doing this gentrification, they like appease the person by being like, okay, here you go. But really it's just so condescending, and they're not actually listening, and they're not actually helping. But then to move on to just general show symbolism, obviously this show has so much going on, from the fact that their passive homes are mirrors, like I said, which distort the world around them while trying to fit in and hide and assimilate the culture around them. But also that scene with the turkey that Kara carves, which by the way, in an interview, so Nathan and Benny Safdie had their own idea of what that symbolized, but when they met with Kara, the actress who plays her, like in character, they asked her to explain what this meant, and Kara explains it the way she does in the show. And Nathan and Benny, like, that's kind of what they had intended, but she said it so eloquently that they were like, wow, like that's it exactly. Like, you worded it so much better than what we even had intended with that scene. And so they asked her permission to include what she said in the show. So that monologue she gives to Whitney about what the turkey means, that was the actress who played Kara. Like, that was her interpretation of the turkey. But yeah, so when it comes to the symbolism, I think in some ways, like, it would be interesting to know what Fielder and Safdie meant specifically. And in some interviews, they do kind of talk about what it means. But also, I don't think they're super attached to their own interpretations, and they're open to other people's ideas. So in some ways, like, I think this show and the various symbolic elements can mean so many things, and I think that's fine, right? I think it's meant to just have so many different interpretations, and I don't think there is one concrete answer as to what every little thing symbolizes. And someone even asked Benny Safdie what it meant with Emma Stone looking into the camera in that final scene, and he didn't direct it, so Nathan Fielder maybe would have had an answer, but Benny Safdie was like, I have no idea. So also sometimes these people just do something without really knowing, you know, what they're even trying to say, but then the audience can sometimes understand it better than the creator even does in the moment. Like Stephen King has talked about this, how he wrote a book, like he was just saying it without totally understanding what he was saying, but then other people saw something that he himself didn't even see, if that makes sense. So yeah, I know there's a lot I didn't even get to here, but this has already been a long video, so those are my main thoughts, especially in regards to the finale. But yeah, I thought this show was fantastic. It truly is unlike anything I've ever seen in a lot of ways, and is so unique in the way it's filmed, right? And the story itself and the characters and that finale. And I didn't even really get into the curse symbolism, right? Because with Asher, Did he curse himself when he told Whitney that if she doesn't want him around, he will just be gone? Did Whitney curse him by internally wanting him gone? And then does Dougie, is he crying so much because at one point in the show, he curses Asher? And so does he feel guilty? Does he feel like his curse is what caused Asher to go into the atmosphere? And then also with Nala, we see that she might actually have like supernatural powers. And so it's like, so what does that mean? Like, was her original curse, was there something more to it? Or was it just the chicken? And the chicken in the bathroom, like, why did that end up there? Like, does it even matter? I don't know. But also the whole story with them giving the house to the family and how that does not go the way they want. Like, they were expecting to be, you know, a heartfelt thank you, and they think he's crying when really he's not, and they want it to mean something so much more. Like, look what we're doing for you. And that obviously is symbolic, again, of people who like are trying to help other people and expecting to get so much gratitude. But really, like, they're just helping people in order to make themselves look good. And also, like, that family, they were already living in that house anyway. I think they were squatting maybe, but to them, they were living in it without paying rent. And so Asher and Whitney, they really haven't changed the situation, because it's like, well, now we have to pay property taxes. So now we're paying more. Even if we have the house, we're now paying more with property taxes than when we were just living here before you even showed up, you know? So anyway, there's so much to this show. Comment down below your thoughts on what I have gone over, but also comment your thoughts on things maybe I didn't even touch on. Share your thoughts down below and let's talk about whatever aspect of the show you want to talk about. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Do not forget to like and subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you next time. Bye.